So you can take notes. All right, the first thing when you enter P5, these two functions will already be made for you. But if they are not, write down the first thing should be to make the function setup. And you have to make the function draw. You have to start with these two functions for animations in P5. Let me zoom in. Okay, so this is inbuilt for you. This will be made for you. The second thing you have to do is create a canvas. What do you understand by canvas? It's basically the board in which you will do the animation. And that thing should go inside setup. And the function to use will be called create, and a capital C, canvas, open and close. Write this down, very important. Create canvas will go inside the setup function. And you have to put two parameters inside the function. So that will be the length of the x-axis, let's say 600, comma, the length of the y-axis, which will be, let's do 600 again. If you run this, there is a canvas made here, which you cannot see as yet. But step one will be to make the canvas, which will be made here, which you cannot see as yet, because it's white in color. We'll give different colors later. Is that okay? So two things inside create canvas, the length of the x-axis and the length of the y-axis. Okay, now let's write down how to add color to the canvas. So step two, adding color to the canvas. Now, does anyone remember how do you put comments in here? Double slash, you put a comment. So next step is to add color to canvas. And the function to use here will be called background. And write down the background function should go inside the second function, which is draw. You can put it here, but the animations won't work if you put it here. So it's always better to put it here. Okay, so the function is called background, open and close. Okay, now make a note for the background function. You have to add 3 parameters. Has anyone done this before, the background function? Does anyone know? All right, so the 3 parameters will be R, G, and B. So write down 3 parameters, R, comma, G, comma, B. R stands for red, very good. G for, and B for blue. And they will be represented with numbers. So for example, if I say 100, 0, and 0. Which color is dominant here? Red. So if I run this, look at this, the canvas is reddish in color. Make sense? So it's RGB. If I increase this, say 300 is not good. So 200. Make this 50. So look at that. So the G is dominant here. So it will be more green than red. So you can play around to give a color. Now, for example, if you give all three colors the same, say 100, 100, and 100, any guesses what should be the color? What color? Gray, yeah? Did you say gray? White, no, gray. So if they all are equal, it'll be a gray-black color, okay? So in the case when they all are equal, you can just give one parameter, which is 100. And it understands they all are 100. So if you just want to give all same, you can just give one parameter. Just make a note. Does that make sense? All right, next thing, let's add some shapes. So adding shapes. Let the first shape be rectangle. Okay, so to add a rectangle to your animation, the function to use will be called RECT. Not the whole thing, just RECT. And open and close. Now make a note for the rectangle, there'll be four parameters. Four parameters for the rectangle. It will be the X starting point, comma Y starting point, comma the width of the rectangle, comma the length of the rectangle. So four things, write it down. X, Y, W, and L. X coordinate, Y coordinate, width, and length. So let's see, if I say 0, 0, what is this? This is the position of X, and it means it's at the beginning here. So this is 0, 0. This is 600, 0, and so on. Comma, let the width be 100 and the length be 100, something like this. So four things. And if I run this, let's see what happens. Look at that, you get a rectangle or a square at the starting position here. Does that make sense? If I want to bring it to the end here, what should I put here? So in place of X you put, in place of Y you put 0. Let's see if it works. Very good. Why does it not work? Because 600 is the last point. It will go 100 more to the right. So you'll have to put 500 here. And look at that. So this is 500 and this is the length of 100. Does that make sense? And then you can play around. If I do 300, 300. This should be in the somewhere in the middle. Make sense? Okay, that's the first shape. Let's learn more shapes. Second shape will be called, let's see, ellipse. So simple, all you have to do is ellipse and open a bracket. And for the ellipse, again, 4 things for ellipse. So let's see if we get this right. Let's say 100. This is the x coordinate, the y coordinate. Let's see the width of the ellipse and the height of the ellipse. So write down 4 things for ellipse: x, y, width, and height. And run, and look at that. Make sense? And I can play around. If I make this just 50, then it becomes smaller because the height is 100 and the width is 50. So it's longer but not broader. Does that make sense? Well, let's do some more shapes. Next shape will be called the circle. Pretty simple, circle. You can make a circle with ellipse, but circle has a separate function. Circle, open bracket. Any guesses? How many things inside a circle? Just one? Why? 3 things inside a circle. You need the x coordinate, the y coordinate, and the diameter of the circle. So it will be the center x, center y, and diameter. For example, if I say 250, 250, and let the diameter be 9, or let it be a bit bigger, say 49. And if I run this, you get a circle in the middle. Why did the others disappear? Because I removed them from the code. Yeah? Let's do one more shape, simple shape, which will be called the line. Any guesses? How many points inside the line? How many parameters? 2? Why 2? If I just give x and y, can you get the line? 4 parameters inside the line. You need x1, y1, and x2, y2. So write down 4 parameters inside the line. So for example, if I say 100, 100, 200, 200. Run this, you get a line. Make sense? Question? This side? Question? Right, so line, 4 things. You can try one more, which will be called quad. But any guesses? What is a quad? What is it? A quadrilateral. It means a shape of 4 sides. So how many parameters here? So you want to make a 8 parameters. You'll have to give x1, x2, y1, y2, x3, y3, and x4, y4. So 4 parameters. We can quickly try it. It's 200, 100, 150, 150, 250, 300, and 400, 450, something like that. Let's see. So look at that, something like this weird thing. It's a 4 shape, 1, 2, 3, and 4. X1, Y1, X2, Y2, X3, Y3, X4, Y4. Is that making sense? Any questions so far? All right, next thing, we'll be adding colors to the shapes now. How do you add colors to the shapes? So let's make a shape quickly. Say a rectangle, and let's do an ellipse. So now just make a note, when you draw shapes, the order matters. For example, if the ellipse was on the top, then the rectangle would be on top of the ellipse. But since this is at the bottom, the ellipse is on the top of the rectangle. Right, so just make a note, the order matters. Is this difficult or okay? Not difficult, right? It's okay. All right, so write down, to add colors to the shapes, you need two functions, which will be called stroke and fill. Okay, so the stroke function, again, three things inside the stroke function. And this function will add the color to the boundary. Just make a note, the stroke function will add color to the boundary. So for example, if I say 100, 0, 20, something like this, and run this. So here's a question, will the boundary go to the rectangle or the ellipse? If I run this, will the boundary go to rectangle or the ellipse? Any guesses? Yeah, let's see. So if you look closely, it goes to both of them. So just make a note, the beginning goes to the whole program. So if you want to give a boundary to ellipse, you will have to write down a second stroke function above ellipse. For example, say 0, 0, 200. So make a note, to give another boundary to ellipse, you'll have to add another stroke function there. So now if you look closely, this thing looks blue. Is that making sense? And just make a note, the highest number you can give here is 255. Anything above 255 will be a 0 or a white color. So the highest number for the coloring is 255. Okay, similarly, the fill function, FILL, three things. say 100, 0, 30, something like that. So which color do you think will show up in these two? Red and blue mix, so a little bit more red. Look at that. Is that making sense? So similarly, if you want to give a different color to ellipse, you'll have to go above the ellipse and give that a different color. So for example, what color do you think the ellipse will get? Green. Is it making sense what's going on? I just make a note for the shapes. You can do one more shape, which is called the triangle, which you can try. Okay, 3 things in the triangle, or 6 things, sorry, for x1, y1, x2, y2, and x3, y3 for the triangle. You can try it when you do it, but just make a note. Okay, now write down the next thing, important thing, which will be called important variable, which is called mouse x and mouse y, like that. Mouse capital X and mouse capital Y. Okay, now let's see. So these variables go in place of the numbers. So for example, in place of 100 in rectangle, if I put mouse X, and run this, any guesses what will happen? Any guesses? So now look what happens. It means the position of X will be the position of the mouse. Look at that. So as the X moves, the shape moves. The position of Y is 100, so that doesn't change. So if you also want to change that, in place of 100 for Y, you put mouse Y. And see what happens. If I move this, I have to run it. If I move the cursor, the shape moves with the cursor. Does that make sense? Pretty cool. Now, what if I put mouse X for the width? Any guesses what will happen? So as the X moves, the shape will be bigger. Let's see. So right now it's not there because the value of this is 0. The moment I come here, it will start to grow. Is it making sense what's going on? Right, pretty cool. All right, let's see. What if I put that in place of fill? What if I put mouse X or mouse Y here, something like that? Any guesses what should happen? So look at that. Here, the value of mouse Y is pretty low. So it's very less red color. So as you keep going down, The red is getting darker and darker because the value of y is increasing. Is it making sense? What's happening? So you can play around with this when you practice. Yeah, let's do a bit more. So now let's write down a new thing, which will be making your own variable. So now who remembers how to make a variable in JavaScript? How do we do it? What was the keyword? Anyone remembers? Let. Very good. It was let. If you remember from before the midterm, let, and you say let x be equal to 0. That's how you define a variable. So now let's see what happens. Let me fix these guys. Right, so in place of this value will become here. So if I run this, what will happen? This will be at the position of x. So like this, you can define your own variable. If I make this 10 or 100 and run it, the rectangle should be at the position of 100. Does that make sense? You can define your own variable. Now let's see why this is cool. With the help of this, you can move the object. You can animate the object. So let's see what happens. To increase the value of the variable, what did we use, if you remember? By 1. If you want to increase the value of the variable by 1, what did we use? Very good. So the end here, if you just put x plus plus, let's make the 0 again. And run this, what do you think will happen? So let's see what happens. Look at that, the shape is moving. What does that mean? That the value of x is always increasing by 1. That is making the shape move. Does that make sense? What's going on? So tell me this, what if I want to move it vertically? If I want to move it from up to down, what should I do? Let's fix this to 0. So for that, you'll have to define a y variable. And where should that be? On the y position here. And should there be x plus plus here or y plus plus? Y plus plus. So now what should happen? Hopefully the object should go. Look at that. Make sense? So now the mistake here is once it's beyond the screen, it does not come back. So to make it come back, you will need the conditional statements, the if and the if else and all that. We won't do that today, we'll do that next week, but let's understand this a bit more. What if I want to move the shape diagonally? What do I do? So this thing moves horizontally, this thing moves. In that case, we put both x and y here. And we do x plus plus and y plus plus. Make sense? If I run this, look at that. Pretty cool. So now do this. As the shape moves, I want the color of the shape to change. How do we do that? As the shape moves, I want the color of the shape to change. Any ideas?
One of the those X.
We can make one of the fields to be X, and then the shape, the color will change as the shape moves because the value of X is changing. So look at that. So now you're basically doing animation. This is like the basics of animation. Did that make sense? Should I do it again? If I run this, it's moving diagonal as well as the color of the shape is changing. Or let's do one more thing. I want the background to keep changing as we move. Not just the shape, not just the color of the shape, but also the color of the background. How do we do that? Any ideas? If I change it to X and run it, it's only becoming black and white because they all are same. So I will have to again put X comma, say X comma Y or something like that. Or here you can put X plus Y or X minus Y, just to mix things up. It will automatically calculate things and change the color. Now if I run this, look at that. The shape is changing and the colors are changing. Does that make any sense? But what if I want to increase the speed of the shape? It's moving at one point at a time. What if I want to increase the speed of the shape? Then what do I do? Any guesses? How do I increase the speed of the shape moving? So this thing is giving, so this is basically the speed. So you say X equals, say X plus something else. Right, so it will increase at the speed of 5 every time. So it should be a bit quicker now. Look at that. The problem here is if it's going out of the screen, it's not coming back. For that, we need a little bit of advanced coding, which will be the conditional statements to hit the screen or hit the wall and bounce back. Make sense? Any questions? Right, so for today we do this much. Go to Blackboard and see if you can do the practice. We stop the recording.